Do you find yourself fighting with other people a lot? Or do you have people in your life who fight a lot? You're really going to want to hear today's insight on using perspective in battles. Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? We've all been hearing about the microbiome and how important it is for our health. It's kind of funny, right? Only 10 years ago, we believed that killing the bacteria on everything was the way to go. I mean, do you remember those sanitizer sprays everywhere? And now we're gradually learning that, surprise, surprise, not really, we actually need the bacteria around us to thrive and even survive. The thing is that everybody's been focusing almost exclusively on the bacteria in your body that helps you digest food. And that is really important because if you can't digest it, you can't live off of the nutrients, and then you develop all sort of GI problems and you have to... Never mind. But research has been showing us an incredible connection between bacteria in your gut and your mental health. Seriously. For instance, studies have shown that the bacteria in the gut of an animal can change its level of depression. And more research is coming out showing that the same exact thing probably plays a role in anxiety, depression, maybe even autism and ADHD. Isn't that amazing? So I did some research and I decided to add a probiotic mix that helps not only mood, but also the communication between my gut and the brain. It's called Amare, and their wellness kit takes care of everything that I need. The probiotics that have been researched to provide actual tangible help, and the prebiotics and everything that those bacteria need to thrive and do their work. I've been using it myself for 3 months, and I gotta say, it's really helped regulate my mood and keep me even. And it's helping me feel less foggy too, especially in the morning. Look, these guys really did their research, and this stuff is top notch. If you want to get it for yourself, just follow the link in our show notes and you can join the mind biome revolution with me. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe, and I'm here with you to share some secrets that I've learned over my lifetime on how to get into fights less with people, resolve those fights faster, and live a life that is just less full of conflict. Is that something you feel like you'd want? I feel like we all want that, right? I don't know about you guys, but I did. I used to fight with people a lot. I used to disagree with them. I didn't really fight. I've been in a couple of fights. Let's see. I've been in like a junior high fight, a high school fight. I think maybe 2 fights in high school, and then a couple of fights when I was in jail. So maybe like 5 or 6 fights in my entire life. Like fights, I'm talking like, you know, when fists hit other people or when you kick and wrestle, like that kind of stuff. Right? The usual, I don't know if it's usual. The usual for like a lot of guys, right? Like after school, lunchroom kind of fights. So I've been in those, but I'm not talking about that. I wasn't a fighter in that way. But I used to disagree with people a lot. And I want to kind of explain to you part of the logic that led to that, because it's not like I thought of myself as a person who fights a lot with others. But it kind of went like this. The number one piece was I'm smart. And I may have had a lot of negative self-concepts in my life early on, like with anxiety and fitting in, etc. But being smart is something that was always reinforced for me and my family. My dad would always say it to me, and he was a really smart guy, so that held a lot of water. My mom would say it to me. Some of my teachers would say it to me. Like this thing always in parent-teacher conferences was, Adi's really smart, he does really well, but he talks too much. Not surprisingly, by the way, I picked a career where I have to talk a lot, so that works. But I'm smart was the first part. As a follow-up to that was, therefore, I have a lot of knowledge. I know a lot of things. And that was true, by the way. I had an entire bookcase when I was a kid at home that I read 3 or 4 times through. I would read encyclopedias. I would collect a lot of knowledge, right? I knew a lot of facts. To this day, Sophie jokes all the time that we'll be talking about a topic and I will have some weird, arcane, bizarre side knowledge of that topic. She's like, how do you know that? And I go, I don't actually really know. Probably from some web surfing I should have done, or, just NPR blasting through while I'm in the car for 15 minutes. But I collect a lot of information and always have. When I would disagree with somebody, there was number 3, which is the person that I'm disagreeing with is seeing things the wrong way. And that was an important one, and one that I believed wholeheartedly. Like when I was growing up, I thought that a lot of people saw things the wrong way. They were wrong. But what I thought was, I can use my intelligence to share with them my facts and my knowledge. And once they understood what I do, once they knew what I know, they will change their mind. And therefore, given the fact that I'm intelligent and, I have the motivation and the time, definitely when I was a kid, I had the time. I saw it as kind of my job to educate and persuade people that my knowledge beat theirs. Now, I hope you're sitting down for this next revelation. It rarely ever worked. I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but like if you sat down with somebody before and you have one opinion, they have another, you have one way of looking at things, they have another, and you sit down and you're pretty persuaded that if you can just tell them what you know, they will change their mind. They never change their mind, like ever. It's not a thing that happens. They have other ways of looking at it. They disagree with your facts. They don't believe you, but rarely do they actually change their mind. Every once in a while, it goes to this example. I don't know if you ever had this happen to you, where you start going online, you pull materials, you show them the links that you were looking at, they show you theirs, and eventually you talk. And maybe every once in a while, it changes somebody's mind. But most of the time, it doesn't do anything. Now you just are pissed at each other because you have one way of looking at it, they have another, and you've completely disagreed. And now, I learned this before the example I'm about to give, but the biggest example of this came to me when Trump got elected. Now, I was giving talks in the lead up to Trump being elected, and I was using the division, the separation between people around the Trump-Clinton kind of camps, the Democratic-Republican camps during that time. And it all got exacerbated when Trump actually won. And obviously, everybody covered this. We've all been through it, so we know it. But if you remember, that was absolutely a time where people on one side, I'll say on Trump's Republican side of the equation, thought that the Democrats were insane and crazy and didn't understand what was going on in the world. And liberals and Democrats thought the exact same thing of people in Trump camp. They thought, do they not understand what happens in the world? Do they not know what's happening? It actually happened to Sophie and I with our friends. We were having dinner at their house while all this buildup was going on. And I remember we were eating pizza and some salad. The kids were, I believe, asleep or playing. And Sophie was pregnant, if I remember correctly. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, we realized, because we were talking about the elections, that they like Trump. And we talked to them a little bit about it, like we were not fighting about it, but we were kind of trying to talk around the topic. But on the way back home, Sophie and I were silent, and I remember we looked at each other and we said, well, that just happened. Did you know that they supported Trump? No, and it was just kind of this discussion because we like these people. They're like some of our favorite couple of friends. And in the old way, in the way that a lot of people are still maybe looking at this issue, based on our knowledge of the other side, they became they became those other people. They did not understand the world the way that we knew it. And we really had to think to ourselves, how's that possible? Can we be friends with them? I mean, if they don't know what we know about the world, what do we do? Do we sit around and educate them on it? Do we really get into these fights? Because we saw couples who were having issues with this, friends who were struggling with this. And if you remember at the time, it's still happening a little bit, but what everybody else was saying when Trump got elected, there was this thing that was going around everywhere, which is, Clinton supporter with the deplorables piece. What so many people were saying was that everybody who voted for Trump was crazy. So many liberals were saying this. And I remember talking to people and saying, is that the best explanation you have for what just happened? Like, over 100 million people voted. Is your best explanation that there's like 50 to 60 million crazy people who left their house and voted for this one person? That actually sounds crazier to me than believing that there are that many crazy people in the US who voted and all kind of picked a direction and just went in that single direction. I would actually argue that it would be incredibly difficult to get 65 million, 70 million crazy people to go do any single thing. Now, I had to resolve this in my own head. If that's not it, then what is it that could have caused that? And it really made me put into a systematic approach the thing that has helped me since I've become, in the last 12, 15 years, involved in the helping profession and being a therapist and working towards my licensure in psychology and then being a coach. And I realized that the reason I wasn't fighting with people quite as often as I had before was because I'd actually totally taken those 6 steps that I talked about before, about the logic of what happened around disagreements in my life before, and actually completely flipped it on its head. And I got to say that I believe that the way to peace and less fighting in the world is actually this opposite approach. And it starts with the I am smart. Let's not start out assuming that the person you're disagreeing with is dumber than you. Let's not make that the starting point. There's a lot of us who do it if we're honest about it, right? Well, I'm smarter than other people, so let me show them that I'm smarter than them. First of all, it creates a power struggle between you and the person you're disagreeing with, which, if you watch my TED Talk or any other things I talk about with the Pygmalion effect and expectancy bias and those sorts of things, already sets up a win-lose situation in this scenario that starts us off with problems. So let's not start with that. Let's put ourselves on equal footing. Now, before I used to believe that I have a lot of knowledge and that was the power. But what I came to believe is these disagreements are not about knowledge, they're about perspective. Yes, there could be missing pieces of information, but perspective matters far more than knowledge here. And the person I'm disagreeing with is not seeing the facts wrong. They have a different perspective on what's going on. And therefore, my knowledge is not going to change anything in the equation. Which leads me to number 4. If I'm going to use my intelligence and my knowledge for anything, it should actually be to understand and see things from their perspective. Again, this is a key point, right? I'm not trying to get them to see my perspective. I have to start out by understanding theirs. Because this is what's happening. You've heard the story about the elephant, right? About, I think it's 6 blind men who walk up to an elephant and they're all feeling different pieces. One is feeling the leg and he says, oh, I'm touching a tree. And the other one is feeling a trunk and he thinks he's touching on a branch or a piece of rope. And each person is holding a different element. And in a separate manner, they can't persuade one another of who is right and who is wrong because they are literally seeing the elephant. They are seeing the thing that they're trying to describe from a different angle, from a different perspective. They're having a different experience of it. Explaining more about it will not help the other person in any way because they're not seeing it from your point of view. So how can you put yourself in their shoes? How can you understand their perspective? If we go to that Trump example for a second, we can talk about racism, we can talk about bigotry, we can talk about socioeconomic status and all of that. But it is not true that people who are not intelligent support Trump. It is not true that only people who are pro-life support Trump. It is not true that only people who are fiscally conservative support Trump, right? There are a number of perspectives, a number of points of view that look at this differently than Democrats and liberals. And unless we can do the job, and this is what I do so much in my practice work, is I need to get into my client's perspective, because my perspective on the world, the way that I see life, may not be their answer. And it is not my job to beat them into submission to see the world my way. I need to understand things the way they saw it. And here's the key to this piece of it, right? Using your intelligence and knowledge to see things from their perspective. You can do it once you have that knowledge. Once you understand that this is a key ingredient, you can create the shift, but you can't ask them to do it because they didn't walk up to the discussion with this understanding in place. So you now have a power, and you can say, okay, why is this person disagreeing with me? What is it about the way they see the world that makes them disagree with my point of view? And what I will almost guarantee to all of you is number 5, once I can see things from somebody else's perspective, I will essentially almost always have empathy for them. I will all of a sudden understand why they see it that way, just by shifting my perspective. And if I can understand things from their angle, if I can understand their perspective and how it informs the way they see the world, the decisions they make, the behavior they take part in, I can do something pretty magical now. And that is, I can draw in my own head the path between my perspective and theirs. My job is not to change their perspective to mine. My job is to empathize and understand their perspective so that I can help us together resolve our disagreement in a way that respects both my journey and theirs to get to this point. Now, that might not be how you wanted this to work in the first place, and I get it, but I got to tell you, unless you're in the debate club, disagreements are not about winning. Disagreements are about resolution. And if you want the resolution, it's about expanding perspective and understanding how to combine them, bring them together, and explore potential new approaches that you may have not have considered before when you were looking to just be right. So, first of all, let's not start out by assuming that the person in front of you is stupid, not a good starting point. 2, it's a matter of perspective, not just knowledge. 3, the person I'm disagreeing with has a different perspective than mine. And 4, I can use my intelligence and knowledge to try to see things from their perspective and not stay stuck in mine. 5, once I can see things from their perspective, I will have empathy for them. And my job is to empathize and understand their perspective so that we can together resolve our disagreement in a way that respects both of our journeys to this point. When you shift the way you perceive your disagreements with others into this, there's a dual benefit. First of all, you have less fights and those resolve more quickly. And secondly, you end up having more respect for those around you, which feels better because let's be honest about it, we want to respect the people we're around. But what's beautiful about it, that usually will turn back right around on you because other people will respect you more because that empathy that you have built with them will allow them to connect with you instead of feel like they need to isolate and distance themselves from you. Look, I can tell you this has absolutely helped me in the way that I interact with others. If it has for you, do me a favor, share this, share it with us on Instagram or Facebook or any of the places that you share your content. But I'm going to tell you that I'm going to ask you to share it with 5 people who can benefit from it. Why? Because I want world peace. That's why. And I got to tell you, if less of us tried to beat people over the head with our knowledge and get them to believe our way of seeing things and instead had this collaborative, empathetic approach to disagreements and resolutions, I think in a few weeks we can have world peace. Draw it out. It'll make sense when you draw 5 people sharing it with 5 people over and over and over. Okay, so screenshot this thing, tag me, Dr. D. Jaffe, and ignited.me, and then share it with your friends. I want to hear how this landed for you. Thank you all so much for listening, paying attention. Love you. I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.